وقل رب زدني علما.
The picture of a book that you can see, من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى البخاري. This book is going to be our main source for this discussion, even though the whole discussion will not be only based on this book. There are other further readings as well and other supplementary sources as well that I have used to prepare for this session. Inshallah, towards the end, I will put a list, only 4 or 5 books name or 6 books name that can help us to have further reading. So the book, let me just say a few words about the kitab. من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى البخاري دراسة في حركة رواية الحديث ونقده في القرون الثلاثة الأولى. This book is authored by a Shaykh from Istanbul, from Turkey, Shaykh Dr. Ahmed Snoober. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this word, Sanuber or Snoober, or maybe any Turkish brother, if they are or sister, they can pronounce it correctly. Shaykh Ahmed, he's one of the students of our great Shaykh Muhammad Awama Hafizahullah. And also I have found in this kitab that min al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam al-Bukhari, this kitab was reviewed by a number of ulama before it was published. And one of those ulama is our respected Dr. Hamza al-Bakri, one of the reliable scholars, mashallah, in teaching in Ibn Khaldun University in Istanbul. So I read this kitab and alhamdulillah, I found it very beneficial. I recommended this kitab to my students as well. A number of them purchased and they're benefiting as well. So I thought it would be from the nasiha that we have in Islam, and nasiha lil Muslimin, like min babin nasiha, to wish good for other people. I thought it would be appropriate for me to share some of the lessons that we learned from this kitab and as general about the topic with other siblings of ilm. And the purpose of this webinar, the purpose of this session today is two. There are 2 purposes. Number one, to be able to understand the system, how this hadith was transmitted from Rasulullah sallam to Sahaba and from Sahaba to Tabi'in. We are going to just cover these 2 generations, Sahaba, then Tabi'in. We are not going to talk about today, we are not going to talk about Tabi'ut Tabi'in or even the other ulama, those who started writing books like professionally, Bukhari, Muslim, etc. We are not going to talk about those topics today. Maybe another time that can be discussed, but today we'll be only focusing how did actually Sahaba learn hadith from Rasulullah sallam, and then how did they transmit and pass on this legacy to the next generation, which is Tabi'in. And the second purpose and second goal of this session is to be confident. So we know, we understand the background, we understand the history, we understand the reasons and purposes of their transmission of hadith and methodologies of their of transmission of hadith, so that we can be confident to defend the hadith. Because we are living in such time that people have even confusion about the established facts. Maybe you know that there is a documentary from USA, from America, what is a woman? Now people even have to ask, what is a woman? Now, not like the new science and the technology have taken us to the so low now, so down, that we are now even doubting the established facts. What is a woman? So therefore, in this turbulent wave of fitna, turbulent wave of confusion, misguidance, it's important for us. If we can't guide anyone else, at least for us, we need to be confident about the legacy that we attribute ourselves to, we belong to, which is hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, let's start with the first and very basic information. Who is the Sahabi? If you now ask me for a reference from Tabi'in time, that wouldn't be appropriate, because how can you demand a Tabi'i to define Sahabi to you? they didn't need any definition for Sahaba, because they were living in reality. So they are meeting Sahaba, they are learning from Sahaba, they are mixing with Sahaba. For them, there was no need for any definition of Sahabi. Similarly, Tabu'ut Tabi'in was, again, for Tabu'ut Tabi'in time, they didn't need to have a clear and jami' mani and inclusive definition for Sahabi. Therefore, we see that the definition of Sahaba actually began from the later generation. For example, Imam Bukhari. Even though, inshallah, today, most of the sources will be even prior to Bukhari. We'll try to quote from them, like Abu Hatim, Ibn Abi Hatim, and all these people, even prior to Bukhari, like we got Mu'atta Malik, and we got Mustad Baqi ibn Makhlad, and other kitabs. But for this information, we are quoting Bukhari and others, because this time, Bukhari's time, they needed to define Sahabi in order to have a professional writing, books, etc. So, and to have the history, the consequence, the sequence, and the chronological order of the narrators. So Imam Bukhari has 5 rawis perhaps, or 6 narrators in a hadith. So for him, it's needed to identify who is Sahabi, who is Tabi'i, who is Tabi, etc. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah defines Sahabi in his book Sahih al-Bukhari. He says Sahabi is a man, is a person, is a man or woman, is a person Sahiban Nabiyya sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who accompanied Rasulullah sallallahu aw ra'ahu, or they just met and saw Rasulullah sallallahu, and that person who met Rasulullah, he or she was a Muslim upon Iman. So therefore, Imam Bukhari's definition is very simple. He's saying anyone who saw Rasulullah sallam or accompanied him is a Sahabi. Regardless, doesn't matter how long he was in Rasulullah's company, for 1 month, 1 day, 1 hour, it doesn't matter. Whereas Ibn Hajar Asqalani, who's a later scholar, like from 8th century, not even 9th century Hijri scholar, in his book Nuzhatun Nazar and Sharh Nubat al-Fikr, he says, Man laqiya an-nabiyya sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ala al-iman wa mata ala al-islam. Ibn Hajar's definition helps us to understand a bit further, because Ibn Hajar says Sahabi is a person who met Rasulullah sallam, not necessarily to see Rasulullah sallam. Now, if you consider this word, you will see there were a number of Sahaba who were a'ma. They did not have eyesight to see Rasulullah sallam. For example, Abdullah ibn Maktum radiyallahu an. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah's ta'rif and definition of Sahabi is a bit inclusive. Now it includes even those who didn't actually see Rasulullah's Mubarak wajh. They just met Rasulullah. They were in his gathering, in his presence. So they are also Sahabi. And Ibn Hajar adds another condition, Mata al Islam. It is a condition that this person remained steadfast upon his death, upon his final moment as Muslim. So both of these definitions that we learned from Bukhari and from Ibn Hajar Asqalani, rahimahumullah, both of them have no condition of long companionship. They just said any time, for any moment, if anyone accompanied Rasulullah, met Rasulullah, is Sahabi. However, we also find that a number of usuliyun, the experts of usulul fiqh and usulul hadith and others, they add another condition. They say that this person has to be in the company of Rasulullah for a considerable time, not just one glance of Rasulullah's Mubarak wajh. Rather, they stayed in his company in Medina Munawwara or Makkah Mukarrama or in other place on any other occasion. So Usuliyun add the condition of ṭullāb, that this person has to be in Rasulullah's suhbah, in his company, for a considerable time. That condition from usuliyun, it's not agreed upon unanimously by all the ulama, but it helps us to understand further in regards to hadith discussion, and I'll clarify this in a minute. After looking at many other different definitions of Sahaba, we find that ulama actually considered Sahaba in different categories. So some Sahaba, for a person to be Sahabi and to get that honor of being Sahabi, it's enough just to see Rasulullah, even just one glance is fine, it's enough. But for a person, for a Sahabi to receive and to be entitled to have all the fadilat, all the virtues that have been mentioned in the Quran, for example, about jihad with Rasulullah, they supported Rasulullah in his difficult time. For those fadilat, if anyone if anyone is going to be considered a Sahabi, we will consider all of his other supplementary information. Did he actually participate in any battle with Rasulullah? Was he in Rasulullah's company for a long time or not? So for those special fadilat, we need a longer time. It's not just enough to have just one meeting in any place, in Arafah, in Muzdalifah, or things. We are not denying their suhbah. We are not denying their great fadilat. No one can reach us. No one can reach them in their fadilat. But still, we are not considering them same as those who had long companionship with Rasulullah. That's important for us to understand in hadith discussion. But in a general public discussion, we will say Sahabis, anyone who met Rasulullah is Sahabi, and they have all those status. But in our hadith discussion, in academic discussion, we are actually going to focus on those who met Rasulullah, had a considerable time with Rasulullah, and participated in some majlis, in some expeditions, in something. So we have to have a considerable time with Rasulullah for us to consider this person as a Sahabi. And it's very clear, if you see those Sahaba who came to Rasulullah's company before Fath Makkah, before the victory of Makkah, and those who came after the victory of Makkah, obviously there will be difference. Those who met Rasulullah, and obviously those who were granted the glad tidings of Jannah, they will be different than those who haven't been granted that glad tidings. Similarly, Muhajir Ansar concept. Similarly, Sigar and Kibar, senior Sahaba, junior Sahaba, middle-aged Sahaba. All these things we need to into consideration to understand our further upcoming discussion about Sahaba and their transmission of Hadith. And as you can see, the third line here suggests, he clearly says, only those who narrated Hadith. Meaning from now on, we are going to actually focus more on those Sahaba who took part in transmission of Hadith. We respect all the Sahaba. We have love for all the Sahaba. We believe radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. They all are pleased with Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with all of them. We believe that. As Sunni Muslim, we have no doubt about any of these things. However, our discussion today is only focused on the Sahaba who narrated Hadith in Hadith field. Okay, now let's talk about this question. Are all Sahabi ʿUdūl? ʿUdūl is jama of adl, which means trustworthy, reliable. So the basic answer to this question is yes, all the Sahaba are ʿUdūl. As-sahabatu kulluhum ʿudūlun. This is a maxim agreed upon by all the Sunni scholars without any ikhtilaf, any considerable ikhtilaf, any considerable difference of opinions. All of the ulama agreed that as-sahabatu kulluhum ʿudūl, all the Sahaba are trustworthy. But again, as I said, our focus is today, in today's session, is only those Sahaba who took part in the transmission of Hadith. So therefore, we will give example with their names, because it's easy for us to know them. It's easy for us to have some information, some backgrounds of the Rawi, etc. So we will focus on them. And how do we establish that adalat for them? Now, what do we mean? Like from an academic perspective, what do we mean by adala? What do you mean by trustworthiness and reliability of that person? So if you look at Usulul Hadith Kitab, then you will find that the ulama, they define adalat as such a character instilled in a person that stops him from committing kabira guna, major sin, or like doing something immodest, etc. But again, this definition requires much more in-depth look in a person's biography, etc. And the point that matters to us here in Hadith transmission is about reliability in or trustworthy in his narration. Therefore, we are not going to talk too much, or we are not going to look into too much of his personal life. Did he make kabira guna or not? Yes, we believe that all the Sahaba are ʿUdūl, but this is not our discussion today. We will focus on adala from the perspective of being reliable, in a sense that this person does not intend to make up anything or to attribute anything falsely to Rasulullah. So our adala today is a quality that the person does not lie, and that person doesn't make anything up from himself and doesn't attribute anything falsely to Rasulullah. This is the adala that we are talking today in this session. And now, how do we know this then? How do we know that the Sahaba, those who reported Hadith, they never lied, wal-iyāzu billah, they never attributed anything falsely to Rasulullah. They only transmitted to us whatever is true, whatever is real. How do you confirm that? So we have different ways to do this. Obviously, for us as Sunni Muslims, we have Quran, we have Sunnah confirming this point. But let's look at it from an academic perspective, from a like a different argument, that we will see their adalat and their trustworthiness can be even proven, can be even established through historical events and from historical perspective as well. And the first thing that we should look is the battles. Yes, battles are not something that we should be pleased and happy about, but those battles that happened between Sahaba, among Sahaba themselves, that help us to understand their level of amanat, their level of adalat. And that is, as we all know, there was a battle of Siffin, there was a battle of Jamal that happened. So for example, battle of Jamal happened between Sahaba. And then we got battle of battle of Jamal between Ali and Aisha radiyallahu anhuma, and battle of Siffin between Ali and Muawiyah radiyallahu anhuma. So these battles actually help us to understand their trustworthiness. And that is, all this battle happened, and they had they fought against each other, but never ever, none of the Sahabi, not even a single Sahabi, insulted the other party with any statement of Rasulullah. So imagine if they were not trustworthy, if they were not reliable in their aqwal, in their statement, in their transmission, then it would have been easy for them to insult the other party by saying that, look, Okay, so it would have been easy for the Sahabi to say that, look, you are fighting against me. You don't have any right to do so because Rasulullah said that against you. Rasulullah said that about you. So you are an unreliable person anyway.
Shaykh, inshallah, if you need to take a few minutes.
Yeah, it's okay, inshallah. I have tea with me. It just sometimes happens this.
Yeah, inshallah, but if you need to, then it's fine. You can.
Yeah, so I was saying that these battles are actually in a positive way. We can look into these battles and we find that the Sahaba, for example, Sayyiduna Ali radiallahu anhu and Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu anha, they never ever reported any hadith saying, "Oh Ali, how can you fight against me? You are not reliable. Rasulullah said this about you," something made up. Or Ali could have said about Aisha radiallahu anha that, "Wa Aisha, how can you fight against me? Or how can you oppose me? Rasulullah said this about you." But never ever they insulted each other with such thing. They never made up or they never attributed anything to Rasulullah to win the battle or to win the argument or anything. Never. So these battles prove that the Sahaba were the highest level of trustworthiness. They never ever made up anything to attribute to Rasulullah. I hope that's clear. The second point, in fact, let me tell you another thing here. Even obviously those battles happened between Sahaba. Many tabi'in participated in these battles as well. With Ali, with Aisha, with Ali, with Muawiyah radiallahu anhum. Many tabi'in were there. But those tabi'in even never ever made up any hadith to support the Sahabi that he is with. So the supporters of Ali never said, "Oh, Rasulullah said this against Muawiyah, so Muawiyah is not reliable" or something. Never ever. And the supporters of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu never insulted Ali radiallahu anhu or anything. Rather, we find an amazing example here. There is a tabi'i. His name is Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith ibn Hisham. And we find his hadith in Jami' Tirmizi. Subhanallah bil Azim. This rawi, this tabi'i, Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith, he was with Aisha radiallahu anha in the battle of Jamal. So he was supporter of Aisha. But look at Tirmizi, you will find a hadith from Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith ibn Hisham, which is explaining or which the hadith is from Ali radiallahu anhu. So do we see here that the supporter of Aisha is reporting a hadith from Ali radiallahu anhu. So in the battlefield, they are fighting against each other, but in the hadith transmission, they are reliable and they are trusting each other. Even they are enemies, for in the battle, they are opponents, like opposite to each other, but in hadith transmission, they still trust each other. Abdurrahman bin Harith is not saying, "No, I shouldn't report from Ali because he's against me and maybe he's not reliable." No, they know that battles happen for other reasons, for matters of authority, etc. But in hadith transmission, everyone, like, they trust each other. They have examined them, they trust each other. So that helps us to understand the trustworthiness of Sahaba. Let's move on. The battles, from the battles, we can take another lesson, which is very important, is that, can you imagine the Sahaba, and these battles, as you know, my siblings of ilm, that these battles happened, why? The main root was that Ali radiallahu anhu said, "Okay, let the situation calm down, and then we will revenge from the killers of Uthman radiallahu anhu." But Muawiyah says, "No, we need to punish those killers immediately." So therefore, their ikhtilaf began, or the disagreement began, just about the killers of Uthman radiallahu anhu. One party said, "We should take some time and then we can punish them. Other party said, no, we need to punish them straight away, immediately. So Sahaba are getting involved in fighting just about the right of Usman radiallahu anh, that why was he killed unjustly. Now, can you imagine these Sahaba will tolerate anyone if they lie against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Muawiyah radiallahu anhu is not accepting Ali's position, and Ali radiallahu anhu is not accepting Muawiyah's position. They are disagreeing with each other just on this matter, which is not related to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is related to Uthman and his killers. So they are not tolerating in each other in this. They are saying, no, we cannot hesitate. We cannot delay this. We have to do it quickly, immediately. But now, can you imagine these, and they are getting involved in fighting. Now, can you imagine they would tolerate anyone who makes hadith and then attributes it false to Rasulullah. In fact, these battles prove to us that if anyone had to do that, or if anyone were to do that, Sahaba would have declared fight and war against that person. How can you make things against Rasulullah? So that battle, like from this perspective, helps us to understand the trustworthiness and reliability of Sahaba. Not only that, we have another like logic point to say that why the Sahaba would be trustworthy is that Sahaba are the people who sacrificed their life. They immigrated from their homeland to Medina, or even to Abyssinia, all these Ethiopia, all these places. So they said goodbye to anything and everything just to be in the company of this noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, how can you logically think that these people who did everything to be in this person's company, now they are going to start lying against him? They are going to start lying or attributing false things about him. This is unrealistic. The people who do so much to be in such person's company, they will obviously love him so much, and they will try to be loyal to him more than anyone else. That's another fact to remember when we talk about trustworthiness of Sahaba. Now let's talk about from religious perspective. How can you prove that all the Sahaba or the Sahaba are adil, all the Sahaba are trustworthy, and especially those who are involved in the transmission of Hadith from religious perspective? And when I say religious perspective, I have three things to say. Number one, as you can see here in the bracket, story of three Sahaba. This story is known by everyone, and it is mentioned in Surah At-Tawbah that three Sahaba, for some reasons, they could not participate in the Battle of Tabuk. And Rasulullah came back. These three Sahaba were sincere. They were not munafiqun or anything. So they came to Rasulullah, but Rasulullah said, okay, until I receive any clear instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will avoid talking to you, etc. So Rasulullah commanded Sahaba not to talk to these three Sahaba. So all the Sahaba, all other people were prohibited from talking, speaking to these three men. Now, look at the loyalty of these Sahaba. 50 days passed by. Not even a single person break that law. Not even a single person secretly speaks to any of these three Sahaba. So that means all the Sahaba around Rasulullah were very, very reliable people. They were trusted by Rasulullah, and they were trustworthy to Rasulullah, that when Rasulullah said, don't speak to these three men, none of them broke that law and that order. They remained for 50 days, and Sahabi himself confirmed that none of the people talked to us during these 3 days, even though we tried so much to make them speak to us, to make them say a single word to us, but none of them did that. So that incident itself, which is mentioned in the Quran, and we find all the details in the Hadith and in the history books as well. So that incident helps us to understand the level of taqwa, the level of adalat, the level of trustworthy and reliability that the Sahaba had. Okay. Now let's move on to the second point, Prophet's trust in them, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. how Rasulullah trusted them. Rasulullah's trust can be seen in two different ways. Number one, Rasulullah is the one who entrusted them, who enjoined upon them, who trusted them to say, Ballighu anni walau aya. O my Sahaba, pass on from me, convey from me even a single statement, even a single ayat, even a single statement, hadith, or any teaching from me. So that means Rasulullah has trust on his Sahaba. He saw them, he met them, he was with them. So now he's telling them, go and report from me. That shows his thiqah and his confidence in them. Secondly, Rasulullah in his lifetime, he sent a number of Sahaba to different lands, to Yemen, to Bahrain, to other places, to teach, to collect zakat. So do you see? Rasulullah is trusting them that I can trust my Sahaba, they will be trustworthy people. So that's why Rasulullah is sending Abu Mu'adh, Rasulullah is sending Abu Musa, Rasulullah is sending Abu Hurairah and other people to different lands for teaching purposes even. So that shows Rasulullah in his lifetime, he trusted them and he appointed them to carry out the transmission of Hadith task. Now, finally, we can look at the Quran. Obviously, Quran has a number of ayat where Quran explicitly mentions kuntum khayra ummatin, addressing the first generation of Muslim, which are Sahaba. Quran mentioned in Surah Al-Fath, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ فَأَنزَلَ السَّكِينَةَ عَلَيْهِمْ. And Fath Makkah happened in 8 Hijri, and we all know the majority of the transmitters of Hadith, they were already Muslims at that time, and they were with Rasulullah in the journey of Fath Makkah. And obviously this ayat is not talking about Fath Makkah, this ayat is talking about Bayatul Ridwan. So Bayatul Ridwan, which happened in the 6th Hijri, majority Sahaba, those who reported Hadith, they were also they were already there, and Quran is praising them, and Quran is declaring their great position. For Quran, you have lots of ayat that we can quote, but I think that's enough for us to understand and to respond to those Orientalists who speak about Sahaba's trustworthiness. I think the first few information are very important to understand and to elaborate. Now, the next point is how many companions reported Hadith and how many Hadiths did they narrate. In order to understand this, first we need to know how many Sahaba were there, number of Sahaba. We don't actually have any exact number. Inside Bukhari's narration, and as Dr. Hamidullah mentioned in his kitab, Sirah, he has he has a number of lectures on Sirah which have been printed in Urdu language, Qutubat Sirat, and also Dr. Muhammad Hamidullah has a number of books which have been translated into English, and I will share some of the information about his books later. So Muhammad Hamidullah rahimahullah confirms that the number of Sahaba, it's beyond 100,000. We don't have any exact number anywhere. Hamidullah also says that in early days of Medina, Rasulullah had some ihsa'iyat. From Bukhari's narration, we can prove that Rasulullah asked Sahaba, count how many people are there in Medina, Muslims. So that number we find from 1,500 to 3,000, less than 3,000. And Mufakkir Islam, Allama Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali Nadawi says, there were 3 times when Rasulullah got his Sahaba to count the number of people in Medina, like Muslims population. So all these 3 population, 3 times, the number never goes beyond 3,000 in Medina Munawwara. But obviously there were Sahaba in other countries, other places, other areas. And during in the final Hajj, Hajjatul Wada, we got more than 100,000 Sahaba participating in the Hajj, in the final Hajj. So let's say more than 100,000 Sahaba are there. However, they all never participated. They never, like, not all of them participated in the transmission of Hadith. And it's completely reasonable. How can we expect all the Sahaba to transmit Hadith? Because for a number of reasons. Number one, not all of them had enough time with Rasulullah. Now imagine those who are coming to perform Hajj in the final Hajj with Rasulullah. Not all of them were highly academic people, like learned people, ulama, etc. There were general public Muslims who participated. So, number one. Secondly, just because someone learns, just because someone studies, it doesn't mean they will then teach it. Many people, they graduate from madrasa, from universities, and they become specialists in one field. They get PhD degrees in one science or in one discipline of knowledge. But again, in real life, maybe they get involved doing something else. I know many friends, they have their degrees in one field, but they're doing job in another field. That happens. So just because many Sahaba learned from Rasulullah, it doesn't mean it has to be taught by the Sahaba as well. However, this shouldn't take us to another question. Oh, does that mean then many Sahaba learned from Rasulullah, but they didn't report, so we have some missing Hadith then? No, there's no reason to think like that as well, because there were ulama whose lives were dedicated just to teach. So therefore, the Sahaba, yes, not everyone was involved in transmission of Hadith, but those who were involved in transmission of Hadith, their life was dedicated. So they were specialists, academics. So their transmission of Hadith is enough for us to learn about Rasulullah Sallallahu and to learn the Sharia from them. Different categories in Sahaba narrating the Hadith. Now, the question still remains, then how many of them transmitted Hadith then? How many of them reported Hadith? We find one of the earliest source of Hadith is called Musnad Baqi ibn Makhlad. Musnad Baqi ibn Makhlad. Baqi ibn Makhlad, rahimahullah, an alim who, muhaddith, who was really early, even prior to, or in the early days, like the 3rd century, in the 3rd century Hijri. So anyone now counts, or anyone have any a number of hadiths, they say Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported this hadith, or this Sahabi report, they actually refer to that kitab, Musnad Baqi ibn Makhlad, because it was very, very inclusive kitab. Baqi ibn Makhlad kitab was very inclusive, Jami' Mane. So therefore, majority hadiths were in his kitab, and it's easy to count the hadith of Sahabi from his kitab. Now, what happens after Baqi ibn Makhlad, we have Imam Ibn Hazm from Andalusia. He writes a book and he counts the ahadith of each Sahabi. So how many hadiths were reported by Abu Hurairah? How many was reported by Ibn Mas'ud, etc. And he gives us a brief idea. I want to present that here as well. Let me see. Okay, I'm sure, I hope you can see there is a kitab here in front of me, Asma'u Sahabati Ruwat. If someone can just confirm to me. Is the book can be seen?
Shaykh, we can see.
Okay, طيب. So this is the kitab that we are going to look at it now. Asma'u Sahabati Ruwat. This is the manuscript page. It's important to see the manuscript as well. Nowadays, everyone is just obsessed and fascinated by the printed copies, and no one wants to actually look at manuscript, whereas actually looking at the manuscript is more important for a scholar. And it's sad to say, again, in the Western academia, that where we are living today in Western countries, majority scholars, their research, it's sad to mention their research, their academic writings and everything, majority of them are based on secondary sources. Anyway, طيب, so we should actually be, our siblings of ilm, those who are students, we should elevate our status, and we should develop our skill to a level that we can actually benefit from the manuscripts, because the time is the time everywhere. Everything is fake. Everything is just duplicated and stuff. So there will be a time when we need to verify the information directly from the manuscript. So I would ask my colleagues and my friends, students, that let's learn how to read actual handwritten copies, manuscripts, etc., so we can defend Sunnah and Hadith. طيب. So look at this kitab. It's written by Ibn Hazm, and this kitab has 1,000 Sahaba. So Ibn Hazm mentioned 1,000 Sahaba who reported Hadith, and then Ibn Hazm tells us how many Hadiths were reported by each Sahabi. We look at some statistics and some of the points from this book. First, we should remember Ibn Hazm here, that Ibn Hazm said 1,000 Sahabi. Whereas we find Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, he finds almost 1,800 Sahaba reporting Hadith. And then we find Shamsuddin al-Dhahabi, he confirms in his study, in his book Tajweed Asma' Sahaba, he confirms that there were actually 1,500 Sahaba who, about, not exactly 1,500, approximately 1,500 Sahaba who took part in transmitting Hadith. So let's take Ibn Zahabi's opinion, because the scholars after Zahabi, they investigated, they carried out some other researches and surveys, etc., and they find Zahabi's count as most authentic or more reliable. So let's say 1,500 then. We got 1,500 Sahaba transmitting Hadith. And among these 1,500 Sahaba, not all of them are reporting Hadith in the same level. Not all of them are reporting Hadith the exact number, 200 everyone, or 500 everyone, or 1,000 everyone. No, there are differences in their transmission. So the difference, what is the difference? Muqillin, mukthirin. You will find some of them are reporting a great number of Hadith. Some of them are reporting a small number of Hadith. But just let's have this book. So this is, we see the first person here is Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reporting 5,374 Hadith. Khalas, he's the most highest number. This is the most highest number of Hadith. And then you see Ashabul Alfain, only 2,000 Hadith. Only three person here, 2 Sahabi and 1 Sahabi here. And then you go Ashabul Alf, 1,000 Hadith reported by a number of Sahabi again. So do you see? Only 7 Sahaba we found here. Only 7. Please remember, only 7 Sahaba who reported Hadith in a great number, like 1,000 or so, 1,000 or beyond 1,000. Only 7. Just remember the only 7. And then we go Ashabul Mi'in, the Sahaba who reported hundreds of Hadith, maybe 800, maybe 500, 300, etc. And they are not, not many. A simple number, 7, again 7. And then you got Ashabul Mi'atain, 200 Hadith reported by, again, only how many? 4 of them. And then you got Ashabul Mi'ah, 100 Hadith reported by, again, the list is very short. You can see it's only up to 38. Khalas, gone. And then we got Ashabul Asharat, tens of Hadith, maybe 90, maybe 80, maybe 50. I like that. Again, the number you will see, not many. Finish here. And then we got Ashabul Tis'at Ashar, only 19 Hadith you got, two people. And you got 18. And then you got 17, 3 people here. And then 16, 15, 14. And the number goes down. My point is, again, let me see. So here 7 Hadith. And then you go 6. And then we see 5, 4, 3, 3, and then we got 2. Okay. Now this is my point. You got Ashabul Afrad, only 1 Hadith. So we will have in this book, we have 1,000 Sahaba. That means almost half of them reported only a single hadith in their entire life, or in the entire hadith literature. We have only one hadith from them. And if you look a bit forward, like then you will find that only maximum 17 to 20 Sahaba are those who reported a big number. And majority of them are reported 10, 15, 2, 1, and one hadith is reported by the majority Sahaba. And if you consider Zahabi's number, like 1,500 Sahaba reported hadith, you'll find two-thirds of them reported hadith as one, and only 1/3 reported maybe 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, 500, etc. And only 7 of them reported hadith as more than 1,000. This is an important number that we should remember, that will help us to understand upcoming discussion. And we looked into Ibn Hazm, who is one of the earliest scholars as well. So now let's think realistically the reasons for these different categories. Why different numbers? Why not all of them report in a fixed number? Why not everyone 50? There are a number of reasons. And before we understand that difference, let me understand another time frame here. That's important. Time frame. And if you look at the time frame, we can categorize Sahaba into 5 groups. Number 1, those Sahaba, those great senior Sahaba, great meaning in terms of age, senior Sahaba who passed away during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr and Umar. For example, we got Mu'adh ibn Jabal, we got Bilal radiallahu anhu, other Sahaba. They died within this time frame. So any Sahaba who passed away during the Khilafah of Umar and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhuma, we will call them as great senior Sahaba. Like in terms of age, they are very like senior. The second category will be of those Sahaba who passed away during the Khilafah of Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhuma. And then the third category will be of those Sahaba who passed away during the time of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. We will call them as middle-aged Sahaba. And then the next group, fourth, will be those who passed away during the time of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. We have a great number as well, like Jabir ibn Abdullah, and then Jabir ibn Samura, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. They are all in that category. We can call them Sigharus Sahaba, meaning junior Sahaba. And then finally, we'll have the Sahaba who, mashallah, lived for long life, like even until 90 AH. Do you imagine? Like 90 AH, meaning they lived 80 years, 8 decades after Rasulullah. So these are the most junior Sahaba, and they mashallah live for long. So these are the categories of Sahaba in terms of their time frame until when they lived. Now let's go to our main point, categories in terms of their narration of hadith. So as we saw in the book of Ibn Hazm, only 7 of them, who are Abu Huraira, Ibn Umar, Anas, Sayyida Aisha, Ibn Abbas, Jabir, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. These 7 are the most, like they are the reporters of the most hadith, 1,000 and plus. Apart from them, so they will be called mukthirun. And apart from them, rest of them are muqillin. And if you want to count those who reported hundreds of hadiths, then you will find 17 of them are actually mukthirun, and rest of them are only 1 or 2 hadiths. And subhanallah, the great thing is here, if you compare between the ahadith of 17 and the ahadith of the rest of Sahaba, you will see these 17 Sahaba have covered all the hadiths which are recorded by those who recorded only 1 or 2. And that gives us more assurance and more confidence in their hadith. If you want to check that, you can, obviously you don't have to be a great scholar just to check this. Just go to Jami' Tirmidhi, Sunan Tirmidhi, and you can check that. Imam Tirmidhi, in each chapter, he records a number of hadith, and then he says, وَفِي الْبَابِ عَنْ فُلَانٍ وَفُلَانٍ وَفُلَانٍ. And you can see through that the ahadith which were recorded by the muqillin, by those who reported only one or two, their hadith has already been recorded by one of those 17 mukthirin Sahaba. That's important information for us to understand the dimension here, and then that will help us to understand upcoming discussion. Now, a person might ask a question. Why? Why not everyone same reporting, and what causes them to report a different number of hadiths? Why do some Sahaba report so many hadiths, thousands of hadiths? What's the reason? We will say that has different elements associated with it. Different reason. Number one, the time frame. So how can you expect Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu to report thousands of hadiths when he lived only 2 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So it's not realistic to expect, Abu Bakr should be report 1,000 hadiths. He got only 2 years after Rasulullah to teach. And in these 2 years, he was busy and occupied the matters of Islamic Khilafah. So it's not realistic and logic to say Abu Bakr should report the same amount of hadith that way Abu Hurairah reported. Whereas Abu Hurairah died, radiallahu anh, in 57 AH. So how can you expect Abu Hurairah to report hadith only the way Abu Bakr who reported? Abu Hurairah got 4 decades, or even almost 5 decades with Rasulullah sallam. Without Rasulullah, after Rasulullah sallam. So he got long time to teach and to spread the knowledge of Rasulullah sallam compared to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So now it's not going to be appropriate for me and for us to compare between the number of Abu Bakr and the number of Abu Hurairah in terms of their transmission. So that's in terms of timing. Same thing, Anas radiallahu an. How can we compare Anas radiallahu an with anyone, with Mu'adh ibn Jabal, for instance? Mu'adh ibn Jabal died during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu an, in a pandemic, in a plague. And Anas ibn Malik who died in 93 AH. So it's not realistic to compare between their transmission. Okay. There is another reason which also caused these differences in terms of number of hadiths, is the place where they resided. So for example, a Sahabi who is living in Medina, it's obvious he will have access to many people, and people will have access to him to learn hadith from him. A Sahabi who is in Mecca, he has access to many people, and people have access to him to learn from him, as opposed to a Sahabi who lives in Egypt, for instance. Obviously in Egypt at that time, not many people are traveling to Egypt. So how can we expect Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anh, who was in Egypt, to report the hadith in the same number as Abu Hurairah, who was in Medina? Medina is a hub, is a zone, is a crowd for people. Everyone is coming here. People have access to ulama, and ulama have access to the students. So their hadiths are being circulated and being taught and being spread. Whereas Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As radiallahu an, in Egypt, not many people are traveling to Egypt at that time, and he doesn't have many people to teach. So yes, obviously his hadith number will be less than other Sahaba. So the place where they resided has also impact in the number of the hadith that they reported. And then the third reason is personal reason. Not everyone has the same interest in everything. There are different personal circumstances that will differentiate amongst their numbers. For example, if you look at the Sahabi, those Sahaba who were in authority, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu anhum, or even not the Khalifa, those who were sent as governor to different cities, to Bilad al-Sham, to Yemen, other places, obviously their personal circumstance is different. They are more occupied, they are more busy dealing with the matters of Islam. So now how can you expect this Sahabi to narrate so many hadiths? That's unrealistic. In fact, if that was the case, then we would have doubt on them. Perhaps people would have doubt on them. That how can they report these many hadiths while they were occupied with other things? So alhamdulillah, everything happened in a natural way. The Sahaba who were occupied with other things, they reported less. And the Sahaba who were dedicated for teaching, they reported more. And that's the natural approach. And that's the genuinity and the reality of the matter. Okay. And obviously, you need to take into consideration someone's companionship with Rasulullah. So how can you compare between Aisha radiallahu anha and other Sahaba? Aisha radiallahu anha was in Rasulullah's house. Obviously, it's general that she would know better than many other people. How can we compare between Anas and Sahaba, those who were not in the company of Rasulullah? Anas was Rasulullah's khadim. How can we compare between Abu Hurairah and others? Abu Hurairah was a boarding student, a dedicated student of Rasulullah. So we got to consider their dedication with Rasulullah as well. Also, another fact is that you need to look at their teaching methodology. Not everyone has same teaching methods. And even in our time, you see people, great academics, they are great ulama, but they have different methods of teaching or different methods of occupation. Some of them are just involved in writing. Some of them are involved in teaching. Some of them are just motivational speakers. So you got to consider all these things. So now look at Abu Hurairah and Ibn Umar. Abu Hurairah, who was a teacher, appointed teacher in Masjid Nabawi. So obviously that means he would have more hadith and he would translate more. Whereas Abdullah bin Umar, he was very cautious man. Look at Ibn Masud, he wouldn't even narrate a hadith attributing it to Rasulullah. Very rarely he would do that because he was very, very cautious, etc. And Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, I can ask my colleagues and students that if you look at Ibn Umar's hadith, majority of hadith you will see Ibn Umar who either reporting as a amal of Rasulullah. Majority of the time he is reporting amal of Rasulullah, action that he observed. And also you will see Ibn Umar whose majority hadiths are question and answer. So maybe some people came from different lands and they asked a question to Ibn Umar. So therefore he replied to the question in accordance to the hadith of Rasulullah. Whereas in Abu Hurairah's hadith, you will not see many question answer because he's a professional teacher in Masjid Nabawi, appointed teacher and entrusted by Sahaba of that time. So he's reporting tilqa'iyan. He's reporting like as a lesson. So he's saying hadith. But Ibn Umar, he's responding to the question only. Another fact that you should remember here, that Ibn Umar's hadith, majority of them you will see are reported through his family members, through his son Salim or through his freed slave Nafi. So that shows Ibn Umar actually didn't sit in a majlis, in a masjid to teach hadith. Whereas Abu Hurairah's case, he's not like that. Majority of his hadiths are transmitted by students from across the globe, from Yemen, from Baghdad, Kufa, from Basra, from other places. Because Abu Hurairah was in Masjid Nabawi teaching hadith, so students come and learn from him. But Ibn Umar didn't have that. So therefore, majority of his hadiths are transmitted through his family members. So these are the reasons that for which we have difference of numbers. And as I said, the works on the numbers of hadith, I already presented the book, Ibn Hazm's book, Asma'u Sahabati Ruwat, wa ma li kulli wahidin minhum lil adad. And then also the reality of those numbers. Just one more word to mention here before we move on to the next slide, is that we shouldn't be shocked about the numbers that we hear. 5,000 hadiths reported by Sahabi Abu Hurairah. Or you hear Imam Bukhari says, I choose my kitab from such and such a number of hadiths, 300,000 hadiths or 500,000 hadiths. Abu Dawud says that as well. Sometimes academics from Western countries, they get so confused and they get worried, like how come they have so many 500,000 hadiths? They get two questions. One question, they say, oh, does that mean the Prophet ﷺ was always speaking? That he was always speaking, that within a number of years he spoke 500,000 ahadith? That's one question. And the second question they ask, oh, does that mean we lost all these hadiths? Where are these hadiths now? If you collect all these hadith books, like obviously, if you look at Kanzul Ummal, you will see even less than 50,000 hadiths, 47,000 around hadiths. So where are all those hundreds of thousands of hadiths? Both of these two questions can be answered and can be understood very easily if we look at the methodology of the counting, methods of counting of hadith. And I don't want to go too far here. Let's just look at the kitab Sahih Muslim. If you look at Sahih Muslim, you see in each chapter, Imam Muslim records a number of hadiths, but all of them are saying the same thing. So he records in the same chapter, he records maybe 10 hadiths, but all of them actually conveying and passing on the same message. So from here you go. You understand why do you have so many numbers? Because the ulama, when they counted the hadiths, they had their own methods. Just because there are big numbers, it doesn't mean there are many hadiths. Look at Tirmizi. You got one single hadith, and then you have a number of Sahabah who are reporting the same hadith. So now it could be that the Muhaddis, when he counted these numbers, he counted all of these Sahabis separately. Abu Hurairah separately, and Ibn Umar separately, Ibn Mas'ud separately, Aisha separately, even though they all reported the same hadith. But it will be counted separately. So therefore, this is how the number goes up. The number goes up also for the reason of differences in wording. Maybe the hadith is reported by one Sahabi, Abu Hurairah, but many of his students, they reported it just slight difference in transmission, slight difference in wordings. So now the Muhaddis, when he counts all of these words as different. And Imam Muslim does that. Imam Muslim, he just because of the difference of wording, he makes it another hadith, like he put it as a different sanad, as a different hadith. So this is not a big deal. Wallahi, this is not a big deal. Why? I don't know why people get so scared and so concerned about that number. It's really easy thing. The only thing that requires from us is just a bit attention and attachment with hadith. And obviously, it's really sad to mention, majority of the people who criticize hadith today and hadith literature or Bukhari in particular, you can ask them kindly and nicely and politely, ask them that have you ever in your lifetime, have you ever read Sahih Bukhari from the beginning to the end? I can confirm to you, my siblings, that 99% of them the answer will be no. They never read all the Bukhari from the beginning to the end. It's like they read some journal papers, maybe they go to university and then the lecturer referred to John Bowle and other academics from the West, and they get fascinated by those scattered journal papers, and they think, oh, this is the most knowledgeable man in the world, so we should take him into consideration, and then they dismantle everything that was established as facts. That's really sad. And I don't have any concern about the people of other backgrounds, but why from Muslim background, a Muslim student, how can he be so amazed and influenced and deceived by these academic journals papers? I don't get the reason. And the reason is our fault. We didn't maybe provide them the right education in the early age. طيب, let's move on to the next page. How did they learn hadith from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Before we start talking about this, we'll have only 2 minutes break. And in the meantime, I'll check the chat box if there's any question or anything. And then inshallah, I will. Okay, bi'Iznillah, we are going to continue, inshallah. So as we see, the first point here is here, not every Sahaba attended every lesson. This is something that we need to take into consideration. Meaning Rasulullah ﷺ did not enforce or did not make it compulsory for his Sahaba to attend every single lesson of him. Rather, it was optional, and Sahaba had alternative routes, alternative rota, or kind of timing to be in Rasulullah's company. The most well-known person that I can present here as an example is Khalifatul Muslimin, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. if you ever go through Hadith, you'll find that Umar radiallahu anhu had a neighbor, and they made an agreement that one day his neighbor will go to Rasulullah's majlis, and Umar radiallahu anhu will be in his land, like in the farmland, etc. And in the evening, that neighbor will come back and will inform Umar radiallahu anhu of the events that happened today. And the next day, Umar radiallahu anhu will go to the majlis, and the neighbor will do work in the farmland. And in the evening, Umar radiallahu anhu will inform that neighbor about the events that happened during the day. So from that, we understand there was a natural teaching system there. It's not like enforcement that way we have today, mashallah. Everyone has to attend certain time, and everyone has to read certain book, and school has to teach this and that. Everything is controlled by the government. Everything is controlled by the authority. During the time of Islam, this wasn't the case. So that's one thing that we should remember. And that helps us to understand again, why did not every Sahaba learn everything, or why didn't every Sahaba report everything to us? In fact, not learning. Why didn't they all report everything to us? So that's one reason, one methodology. And also for that reason, it is absolutely fine for some Sahaba to be unaware of some hadith. So if you see in hadith, oh, this Sahabi saying, oh, I didn't know this hadith, it's absolutely fine, because not everyone attended every single lesson. That's a natural approach there. The second way of their learning is that these Sahaba, they were very, very open to transmit any incident to us. Very open. I can give you examples with few things. Look at Sayyidatul Muslimin, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. She is in fact telling us about her necklace being lost, and how did her father Abu Bakr react to that. And then she's telling us how did she go out in order to relieve, and then she got to meet with the mother of Mistah. And then she's telling us explicitly and openly what happened in the journey, and then the story of Ifk. I'm sure you all aware of it. So do you see, there is no ambiguity, there is no hiding and seeking, there is no concealing. Everything is open. The Sahaba are being genuine and real to us. They are telling us everything exactly the way that happened. Things happen. Look at this Sahabi, Abu Zar al-Ghifari radiallahu anhu. Amazing Sahabi. MashaAllah, he tells us, وَإِن رَغِمَ عَلَى رَغْمِ أَنْفِ أَبِي ذَرٍ وَإِن رَغِمَ أَنْفُ أَبِي ذَرٍ. So Rasul, like, he was in the majlis of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah said, like, anyone who says La ilaha illallah, dakhala al-jannah. So Abu Zar said, وَإِن زَنَا وَإِن سَرَقَ. Even if that person has committed zina and saraqa and kabira guna. So Rasulullah said, yes, وَإِن رَغِمَ أَنْفُ أَبِي ذَرٍ. Now, Abu Zar reports this word to us. He's not hiding it. He's just telling us how Rasulullah told him. Look at the hadith where you find taribat yadak. In many places you see taribat yadak. They reported the way Rasulullah told them. So there is a genuinity in their reports, and there is a natural manifestations of their hadith, that they never made anything artificial look super and formal and too academic or too formal or too like artificial. Nothing. Everything they told us that way exactly happened. Okay. Now you might ask us, okay, then why didn't they write hadith? This question itself is not that realistic, for a number of reasons. Because if we ask this question to Sahaba, or Sahaba, why didn't you write? Then it's unrealistic, or it meaning we are rejecting, or we are ignorant about the reality. Because the Arabiya time, like the time, or that time in Arabiya, there was no like general approach to writing. People generally wouldn't write. Rather, their main prestige was to memorize. These people were proud to memorize, because the Arab, even prior to Islam in Jahiliyyah, they were very proud of their memory. They would even remember the lineage of the camels, etc. So in that society, if you say, okay, let me write, that means you have weak memory. That in fact is not a good point. Secondly, you got to consider that we don't have enough means of writing. In Muslim countries, in fact, from after 70 AH, Muslim lands got introduced to paper. And when Khalifa Ma'mun Rashid came to the power, Khalifa Ma'mun, obviously it began from him, but he had the mass production of paper. He got experts from China. If you look at the history, we cannot ignore history. So if you look at the history, you'll see the mass productions of paper happened towards the end of the 2nd century or toward the middle of the 2nd century, Hijri. So how can we imagine, or how can we even expect Sahaba to have mass production of writing and mass productions of books, etc.? In fact, if we had books, that would have been a means of doubt for us. How can we have so many books where there was no enough paper, or there was no writing tradition or writing trend at that time in Arab land in that time? So having many written documents from that time would have been a means of doubt. But because alhamdulillah we don't have many written documents that give us assurance that everything happened in a genuine way and Sahaba memorized. Okay, so that's why we don't have many written documents. But that doesn't mean we have no written documents. That will be wrong if we say we don't have any written documents. We have a number of written documents. Let's have a brief look at this kitab. I hope that is on the screen. And this book is, okay, so this book is Sahifa Hammam ibn Munabbih. Sahifa Hammam ibn Munabbih is a great student of Sahabi Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Abu Hurairah, who died in 57 AH. So that means this document was written before that, because Hammam ibn Munabbih recorded all these 125 hadiths from Sahabi Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. And this book is annotated and edited by great scholar from India, actually, but he resided in Paris, Dr. Muhammad Hamidullah. And he got the manuscript, ancient manuscript of this book from 2 different libraries, one from Berlin, from Germany, another is from Damascus, or whatever we say in English. So Dimashq, he got it from Dimashq. In that book, and you see, he got a good introduction here, Muqaddimah, Tamheed. And if we look, ihtimamun Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam binashri talim, this fact will help us to understand why do we have, and then Tadween al-Hadith, and then you got al-Hadith al-Maktub fil Ahd al-Nabawiyyi. I don't have time to explain this, but I'm just going through this. Al-Kitabatul Ittifaqiyya, like coincidentally written documents at that time. Al-Kitaba bil-Jiddi wal-Ihtimam, not just coincident writing, rather properly with dedication writing of hadith or stuff, not just hadith and other stuff as well. Ta'alifu kitabin ala yadi sahabiyyin. And then you got Tadween al-Hadith al-Sahabah. I would recommend the students who are comfortable to read Arabic, please read this Muqaddimah. It's an extraordinary piece of work by Dr. Muhammad Hamidullah. And if you feel comfortable reading English, then you have the translation of it in English as well. If you just search online, maybe an introduction to Hadith, something like that, I'm not sure, but it is available online. You can look at it, the translation of it. So this book, in that kitab, Shaykh Hamidullah tries to present a number of written documents at the time of Rasulullah or after him. And obviously, if you know Hamidullah, he has another kitab, Al-Watha'iq al-Siyasiyya, meaning the political documents, documentaries from the time of Rasulullah and Khulafa Rashidin. It's an, again, amazing and wonderful work of him. I would recommend this for the students to have a look as well. So, yeah. So it's not like we don't have at all any written document, but it's lack. It's a less. Why? It's absolutely fine. Inshallah, we will learn a bit later that why it was absolutely fine for them just to rely on memory without having any writing. Differences in wording. That's another fact to remember here. Sahaba, the hadith that we have today, majority of the ahadith, if you look at them, are fi'li hadith. Majority of the ahadith are actions of Rasulullah. Sahabi came to Rasulullah, they witnessed something. So they transmitted this to us. They saw Rasulullah doing something in the battlefield, or in Hajj, or in Salah, or in Ramadan, or this and that. So majority of them are af'al, fi'li hadith. Obviously, a number of them are qawli as well. So for fi'li hadith, it's absolutely fine to have difference of wordings, because obviously I observed this incident, I will report it in my own words. You observed it, you will report it in your own words. So that's absolutely fine to have differences in wordings in the narration of hadith. As for qawli hadith, Rasulullah many a times, and look at Rasulullah's hadith transmission. You know, Aisha radiallahu anha said, whenever Rasulullah would speak, he would speak very slowly, not like me today, too fast. He would speak very slowly, and also he would repeat. Sometimes he would repeat each sentence 3 times for Sahaba to memorize. So despite having all this, Rasulullah gave his students leniency to say in a bit differently. As you know, my brothers and sisters, in Quran even, we go ala sab'ati ahrufin. We go sab'atu ahruf, obviously that's again different discussion, but we have different ways to read Quran, some words in certain ways. So it's not a big deal if we have differences of wordings in hadith then. And not only that, Rasulullah said to Sahaba, even look at the hadiths which are day-to-day practice. Let's say tashahud. You go Ibn Mas'ud tashahud in one word and Ibn Abbas tashahud in different words. Why? Because Rasulullah gave them this leniency that in such things you can say a bit differently. We don't call it ikhtilaf. We call it tanawwu', diversity. So that's fine. So why would you be so concerned about just having different words in hadith and then you take it too deep and too seriously? Okay. The next point is, where are the Jum'ah khutbah? Okay. This is a question people ask. Like, if Sahaba reported everything from Rasulullah, they learned everything, then why don't we have Jum'ah khutbah? And if you can't Jum'ah in Rasulullah's time, obviously in Makkah there was no Jum'ah, but in Medina, if you look at the Jum'ah khutbah, obviously Rasulullah prayed minimum more than 500 Jum'ah, because 10 years and each year you got 52 Jum'ah, so then more than 500 Jum'ah. So they ask, oh, where are these Jum'ah khutbah? This question, we should understand it from a real life experience, practice, like Rasulullah's life experience and Rasulullah's life story. How was his khutbah? First, we need to know that. We find some Sahaba, they say, like there is a great Sahabiyya, Hisham. She says, do you know, I learned Surah Qaf. I memorized Surah Qaf from Rasulullah in his Jum'ah khutbah. What does this imply? This implies that Rasulullah Jum'ah khutbah sometimes would be just reading some Quranic ayat. So therefore, why would you be so concerned, oh, we don't have Jum'ah khutbah? Because Jum'ah khutbah many a time was only Quranic ayat. Number one. Number two, Rasulullah Jum'ah khutbah wasn't the like of ours. Today, mashallah, we all love to speak too much. So we have Jum'ah khutbah for 30 minutes, 50 minutes, 40 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. But Rasulullah's khutbah, Jum'ah khutbah was few sentences sometimes. So therefore, you should not be too concerned about that khutbah, that where did this khutbah go? Number three, Rasulullah's khutbah wasn't the like of our khutbah today, when we start talking about all these disputed issues in Jum'ah khutbah. We start talking about disputed matters in Jum'ah khutbah, public khutbah, and then we take people away from our masjid, because we very sectarians that we only talk about our point and everything is wrong. So therefore, our khutbah is not simple, but it is a lesson or lecture. Whereas Rasulullah's khutbah was, majority of them were based on motivation. That's it. Do this, like just to motivate Sahaba, Rasulullah would say few words. Jum'ah khutbah wasn't for Rasulullah to teach lessons properly and give disputed issues. No, there was no like that. So we need to take that into consideration as well. So even, let's say, obviously we didn't miss Jum'ah khutbah, but even say, if we don't have access to this Jum'ah khutbah, that doesn't mean we have missed ahkam and regulations from Jum'ah khutbah. Okay, the last point is, it doesn't mean we don't have any Jum'ah khutbah to us. We have a great number of Jum'ah khutbah where Sahabi says, Qama Rasulullah fina khatiban, or the word, like words, similar words. You find a number of hadiths, tens of hadiths have this word. Qama Rasulullah fina faqal. Rasulullah in his khutbah, he said this. So therefore we have khutbah hadiths. But because these words were motivational words, so Sahaba reported them as general. They didn't have to put a label here saying this is Jum'ah khutbah separately, because that was a general motivational word, so they just transmitted it. And as I said, it's not like all the Jum'ah khutbah got missing. Many of them are still there. If you look at Bidaya and Nihaya of Ibn Kathir, and if you look at As-Sunan al-Kubra of Bayhaqi, you'll find the first khutbah of Rasulullah that he gave in Masjid in Medina, that is still there, recorded, transmitted. طيب. So that's okay. Before we go to the next slide, I just want to go through another topic here. I didn't put it in the slide, but I think it's important. Is how did this Sahaba memorize or remember this hadith? Obviously, we learn how did they learn. Not everyone attended, or they were very open, etc., etc. But the question is, how did they remember these ahadiths to report to us? Can we trust their memory then? The question is how good their memory was. In this case, we have to take three things into consideration. Number one, we'll take into consideration the man or the woman, the hafiz, who is memorizing the hadith. We'll take him into consideration. Number two, we'll take the person from whom they are memorizing, which is Mahfuz anhu. So the person from whom they are learning and from whom they are memorizing. And number three, we'll take into consideration the Mahfuz, the hadith or the words or the element that they are memorizing. So now let's talk about the person who's memorizing. As we already know, and it is well known, not just to Muslim, everyone knows about the great memory of Arab, how great memory they had. But my siblings, we should also remember here a few more things. Can we compare our memory with the memory of Sahaba? No, at all. Because Sahaba time, during those days, they didn't have all these distractions that we have today. We have 110 passwords to remember. We have 110 things to think about. How to earn money, how to get a good job. And so I can fly, I can go here and there, and entertainment, etc. For Sahaba, it wasn't the case. So their lifestyle was very simple. They didn't have so many headache of earning money and going here and there, etc. Also, they didn't have so many responsibilities, like financial responsibilities, etc. that way we have. So therefore, the time was simple. For them, it was simple. They didn't have many distractions. Now we can't even give a lecture without looking to our notes. Our memory is that, and then we come and compare our memory with the memory of Abu Hurairah and other people. So that's not fair to do that. Anyway, so when we say how did Sahaba memorize, first we need to take this into consideration. Their good memory as well as the less distraction. Second thing, from whom they are memorizing, which is obviously in our case, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you remember, as I said, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hadith is not like the speech of anyone else. Every one of us, we can experience this. Imagine today you went to a shopping center and you met a person, you heard something from him. You wouldn't pay that much attention to remember that. But consider another person that you went to meet that person. You are very passionate about that person, and then you meet him after 10 years, or you meet him after so much journey and so much. If you go to his majlis and if you listen to him, obviously every single moment you will remember. Every single word you will remember. For us, for me, like those who live like their parents in one land and they are in one land, when we go to our parents' company, we remember every single moment, even how they're smiling. We remember those things as well. So therefore, Sahaba, we are talking about their memorization of hadith. Hadith of whom? Hadith is of and conversation and speech of not a general man, conversation of a great noble person that they sacrificed their life and their wealth and everything to be in his company. So when they came to his company, it's natural for them to remember every single moment of that person's life. One of our teachers said, and rightly said, that how can you accuse Sahaba of not remembering properly? If you look, and as you already looked, majority of the Sahaba, their hadiths were only one or two. They only reported one or two hadiths. It's only few Sahaba who reported great number. Otherwise, all of them reported one or two hadiths. Now, do you think these Sahaba had so bad memory that they accompanied Rasulullah for a number of years and they couldn't remember, or they couldn't even relate one or two story from him or one or two memories from him? It's completely like normal and absolutely fine that it's possible for them to remember these incidents and these statements, because this is the statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also, that's something that we need to take into consideration. And number 3 is that the thing that they are memorizing, whatever they are memorizing, the hadith basically. So first we talk about the person whom is memorizing, then we talk about the person from whom they are memorizing, their love for him, etc. And thirdly, the hadith that they are memorizing. So now, Mahfuz, the hadith that they are memorizing. We already said that Rasulullah would be speaking very slowly, not fast, and Rasulullah would repeat the words. So that also makes Sahaba, that also enables Sahaba to remember his words more accurately and more carefully and more like well. So these are the things that we should take into consideration when we spoke about their memory of hadith, memorization of hadith. Let's move on to the next slide. We have women's involvement in transmission of hadith. That's amazing to see, because there are different elements for the woman to get involved. Number 1, in Rasulullah's time, Rasulullah encouraged women, or women were allowed, and they came to masjid. So they had more access to Rasulullah generally. Also, women had so great passion to learn from Rasulullah. We find a narration from Ubadah ibn Samit that a woman came to Rasulullah, said, ذهب الرجال بحديثك فاجعل لنا من نفسك يوما نأتيك فيه تعلمنا مما علمك الله. So a woman came and said, Ya Rasulullah, the men have more access to hadith to you, so please dedicate a day for us when we come to you and you learn, you teach us. So Rasulullah dedicated a day for the women, and they used to come and they used to learn from Rasulullah. Allama Khalid Mahmood, Dr. Khalid Mahmood, who was in Manchester, passed away, I think 2 years ago, rahimahullah, who has a book called Atharul Hadith al-Sharif. Not Sharif, Atharul Hadith. Don't get confused with the book of Shaykh Awama. Shaykh Awama's kitab, Hafizahullah, is Atharul Hadith with wahid, not jama. Atharul Hadith al-Sharif fi ikhtilaf al-a'immat al-fuqaha. And Dr. Khalid Mahmood's kitab is Atharul Hadith. Khalid Mahmood's kitab is in Urdu, and Shaykh Awama's kitab originally is in Arabic. Anyway, so in Atharul Hadith kitab, Dr. Khalid Mahmood says after this hadith, that this hadith proves 2 things. Obviously, number 1, woman's passion for learning at that time. Secondly, it also proves the environment for women of learning. It wasn't mixed. The women are requesting Islam to have a separate session for them. So Khalid Mahmood is saying that this hadith is indicating or teaching is instructing the Muslim to have an appropriate environment for women for their study and education. Anyway, let's move on to the next point. Aisha radiallahu anha has praise for Ansari women, which is very well known. She says, "Ni'man nisa'u nisa'ul ansar." The best women are the women of Ansar. Lam yamna'hunna haya'uhunna an yatafaqqahna fi din. Their haya, their like shyness, their sharam didn't stop them, prevent them from learning about deen. So that also indicates the woman's activity, like in being active in hadith. And recently, by the way, I saw Arab scholar, mashallah, did a good research. I think maybe his doctorate thesis or something. He did like su'alatun nisa li Nabi alayhi salam, like the woman, the question that the woman asked to Islam directly or indirectly. Sometimes they used to ask questions to Islam directly. Sometimes they asked through Salama, through Aisha, through other Azwaj Mutahharat. So yeah, from that we can see the woman's involvement in hadith transmission. As you see, women's question too, Prophet ﷺ, lots of questions. Now, number of women involved in hadith transmission. That's something that I want to take into consideration very carefully. We find in Sahaba generation, almost 129 women. 129 women's hadith can be found only in Kutub Sitta. And now if you go to Musnad Ahmed, Musnad of Abdul Razak, Musnad of Ibn Abi Shaybah, and other books of hadith, obviously that number might increase. But only in Kutub Sitta, the statistics suggest that they got 129 Sahabiyya women reporting hadith. And let me tell you one thing, that also gives us assurance and confidence that the hadith transmission was very, very natural and in a genuine way. There was no artificial thing. Why? Because when you look at these women's hadith transmission, you see majority of their hadiths are coming through the family members. So for example, you see an ummihi, you'll find that tabi'i is reporting from his mother, on an khalatihi, from his maternal auntie, or ammatihi, from his paternal auntie. So you see, like women are reporting hadith and they are coming through family members. That also teaches us the genuinity of these ahadith and of these transmission. But later on, this goes down, the number goes down. If you go to the tabi'in time, the women narrators, the number go down. If you go later, the number go down, and that's absolutely fine, because the more down you come, the hadith becomes a professional academic discussion now. It's a literature now. So obviously hadith is being taught in masjid now. People have lesson, people know great alim, so they would go to that person. So therefore it became a literature. But during the first century, Sahaba's time, it was completely a natural transmission, a smooth transmission. So women are reporting hadith, many of them, and the family members, the son, the nephew, they are learning. That's grandson, they are learning. But later on, because we got great shuyukh and we got formal hadith majlis, so obviously women didn't have to do that, and the children, they go to ulama, they learn from them. That's why the number went a bit down time by time. So that again shows the genuinity and the natural manifestation of hadith transmission. Okay, did they have a system of like naqdiyah, a sultan naqdiyah, disapprobation in place? Yes, there was that. And it's not like the Sahaba transmitted the hadith and they had no clue what they are doing. No, all the Sahaba were aware of what they are doing, and in Sahaba community they also ask each other questions to verify that everything is going in the right direction. And that's very nice to see. Even in Sahaba time, they are trusting each other, but at the same time they are asking questions. And let me tell you a few examples. Senior Sahaba time, and all the generation, I will give one example each time. So during the senior Sahaba time, we find Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an. And Zahabi says correctly in his book Tadhkirat al-Huffaz that awwalu man tasabbata fi naqli Umar ibn al-Khattab, that the first person who took the initiative to verify information and to keep the hadith transmission under like certain criteria and condition was Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an. And that makes sense because Abu Bakr, who was Khalifa for 2 years only, he was occupied to deal with them munkirine, zakat and other people. But Umar, whose time was long, Muslim Ummah got expanded, etc. So therefore he had time and he did that, radiyallahu an. Now, you see, Umar radiyallahu anhu is trusting Abu Musa Ash'ari to send him as a governor to Basra. But at the same time, he is asking in one day, when Abu Musa reported a hadith to Umar, Umar said, فَأْتِنِي عَلَى هَذَا بِبَيِّنَةٍ أَوْ لَأَفْعَلَنَّ بِكَ. Or Abu Musa, you need to get a proof that this is actually a the exact and actual hadith, the accurate hadith. Otherwise, I will deal with you. Do you see? Umar radiyallahu anhu then says to Abu Musa to give him assurance that, look, Ana ama inni lam attahimka. I'm not doubting you, Abu Musa. Walakinni, however, khashitu an yataqawwala an-nasu ala Rasulillah. I'm afraid that some people they might start attributing hadith falsely to Rasulullah. So Abu Musa, you are not doubtworthy to me. I trust you. But look, this time is not the time of all the Sahaba. We have tabi'in here. We have new Muslims coming in from different land, from Khurasan, from Kufa, from other parts of the world. And we don't know how trustworthy they are. So as a Sahabi, I'm confirming to you so other people can learn that no one should say anything about Rasulullah without verification, without confirmation. So see, there is a question system. It's not like everyone is just trusting and without any sort of accountability, everyone just reporting hadith. No, that's not the case. We have questioning and answer. Even look at Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. He says, you can imagine how strict the condition was during the time of Umar radiyallahu anhu. You can listen, you can get that from Muawiyah's amal. In one khutbah, in one occasion, Muawiyah who said, Iyakum wa ahadith. You got to be careful when you are reporting hadith. Illa hadithan kana fi ahdi Umar. Unless if the hadith was circulated during the time of Umar. Do you see? He says, فَإِنَّ عُمَرْ كَانَ يُخِيفُ النَّاسِ فِي اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. Because Umar, who was very careful, and he would remind people that you must not attribute anything falsely or even doubtly to Rasulullah. So that's why Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu, in his time, he is telling people that we should circulate those hadiths which were circulated and known during the time of Umar radiyallahu anhu. From that, you can see the critical system, like the critique and that naqdi authority in the time of Umar radiyallahu anhu. Let's move on and let's do a bit fast forward here. Middle-aged Sahaba. And when I say middle-aged Sahaba, I mean those Sahaba who passed away during 40 to 60 AH. 40 AH to 50 AH. And I want to give only one or two examples. Let me give one example. It's the example of between Aisha and Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. What happened? Sahabi Abdullah bin Umar and his father Umar, they both reported a hadith which is recorded in Kitabul Janaiz of the hadith collection. Like, Innal Mayyita, the Mayyit will be punished for the crying of his family over him. If the family cry over him, then the Mayyit will be punished. So Aisha, when she heard this hadith, she said, oh, innakum latuhaddithuni an ghayri kadhabaini. You are reporting hadith to me, this hadith to me, from two men who are not liars, who don't lie. Wala mukadhabaini. And they are not even accused of lying. But walakin as-sam'a yukhti. Sometimes our hearing can go wrong. We can hear wrong thing, meaning maybe we misunderstood or we misheard something, we misheard something. Now, the discussion is obviously long, what the hadith means and why did Aisha radiallahu anha find it not like real or not like convenient with the hadith of Rasulullah. Why does she disagree? That's different point. But my point here is, look, Aisha radiallahu anha is questioning, and she is not doubting Umar or Ibn Umar of lying or anything. She said they are no way accused of lying even. However, I want to keep this hadith under question. So that's the system that's going on there. It's not like everyone is reporting whatever they want to report. And also there's another lesson that we are learning. Aisha, she's not afraid of the authority, of the ruler, of the government, that look, Umar is a Khalifa and Abdullah is the son of Khalifa. So how do I question their narration, etc.? No, she's not afraid. She's very open and she's free to say that. That shows that this critique system was like open for everyone. There was no scariness, or there people were not scared of the authority or anything. And finally, junior Sahaba between Ibn Umar and Abu Huraira and others. So let me maybe give one example. We find that during the time of junior Sahaba, let me give maybe one example of Sahabi Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala. He says, one day there was a question between Sahabi Ibn Umar and Anas radiallahu anhu. So Anas who reported a hadith, and Ibn Umar doesn't agree with that, or he says, I don't remember this hadith as Anas is saying. So Ibn Umar says, Yarhamullahu Anasan. May Allah have mercy on Anas. Wahila Anasun. Anas forgotten. He forgot the actual point here. So look, Ibn Umar who is not accusing or saying Anas is lying or anything, but at least he's saying that Anas who may be mistaken in this narration. So that shows the system is still there. People are keeping hadith transmission under accountability. It's not just everyone is doing anyway. And look at one more example in this slide is Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab is a tabi'i. He is even questioning a Sahabi's narration. Can you see the open like environment, academic environment, where everyone has the right to ask question and everyone is under accountability. Look, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma reported a hadith about his own maternal auntie Maimuna being married when Rasulullah was in the state of ihram. That's a different mas'ala, that can a muhrim person, a person who's in the state of ihram, can he, obviously at that time any sort of relation wati is haram, but can he actually do aqd nikah during ihram? So obviously there is a hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu that said tazawwaja an-nabiyyu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Maimuna wa huwa muhrim. Rasulullah married Maimuna when Rasulullah was in the state of ihram. Now Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, he says wahila ibn Abbas. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, for some other supplementary indications, he suggests that there is a mistake maybe made by Ibn Abbas, even though in kanat khalatuhu, like even though Maimuna was Ibn Abbas khala, Maimuna was Ibn Abbas maternal auntie, but still. So my point is not that mas'ala. My point is just an engagement among Sahaba and Tabi'in. Obviously, this is junior Sahaba, Ibn Abbas, so therefore the Tabi'in got access to him, because Ibn Abbas, who passed away in 68, so many Tabi'in, they had access, and they also got engaged with their transmission of hadith, and that's the main point here. Subhanallah, I unfortunately have to say that we have to omit this part. How did Sahaba pass on the hadith to the next generation? That will be a long discussion. In fact, that will require another 2 hours perhaps, because we got 3 main schools of hadith during those times: Medina, Kufa, Basra. And that again goes back to the reason that we mentioned earlier. Not all the Sahaba went to different areas. and not all the areas have had same access or same facilities. So for Medina, obviously, no doubt, you got great ulama there, and people are coming to Rasulullah like to do ziyarah, etc. So therefore, many hadiths come from Medina. Kufa as well, because Khalifatul Muslimin Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu sent Ibn Mas'ud to Kufa in 17th AH to teach the people of Kufa. And Ibn Mas'ud remained there until 29 AH. So obviously you got 12 years here. So Ibn Mas'ud got to teach many people there. Same Ali radiyallahu anhu came during his Khilafah for a number of years, for a number of months. And when Ali radiyallahu anhu came, he found the city Kufa already filled with ulama and muhaddithun. So there is another reason. And you got Basra. Again, you got Abu Musa Ash'ari in Basra, Imran ibn al-Husayn in Basra, Anas ibn Malik in Basra. So for these great ulama, Sahaba there, that's why if you look at Kutub Sitta, you will find 2/3 of all the sanad. 2/3 of all the sanad from Kutub Sitta go back to these three cities only. Medina, then Kufa, then Basra. And only 1/3 can be found from Mecca, from Yemen, from Misr, from Bilad al-Sham, and other areas. So here you go. This is because many Sahaba moved to these places and they promoted and spread more hadith in this place. For today, we can suffice with this because it's a very long discussion. Let's move on to the last point. The last point is here that did the munafiqun take part in transmitting hadith? That might be a question from some people. And the answer is very clear from two perspectives. Number one, Balazuri, a historian who has a book called Ansabul Ashraf, History. In that book, he mentioned the name of the munafiqun in Medina. Obviously, Rasulullah told Hudayfah ibn Yaman, and then later on, when munafiqun, mainly from Yahud background, they were expelled from Medina. So after the later on, the names got discovered, and Balazuri, from his sources, he got all these names in his book. 34 men, and 34 men, 9 of them from Khazraj tribe, and 25 of them from Aus tribe. So these are the munafiqun. And all these names that we have in Ansabul Ashraf, the munafiqun name, not a single of them was involved in transmitting hadith. So that we got case study from that kitab. And then we got theoretical statement as well from Allama Imam Abul Hajjaj al-Mizzi rahimahullah in his book. Like we find it from Tahdhib al-Kamal and other kitabs through Tadrib al-Rawi, that Ibn Hajjaj, Abul Hajjaj al-Mizzi said, Lam yujad qattu riwayatun amman lumiza bin nifaq min as-Sahabah. Those people who were accused of nifaq, or they were munafiq, there is not even a single narration from them. Lam yujad qattu, never ever a single narration from them. So that's the conclusion from Abu Hajjaj al-Mizzi, a great muhaddith. So we take that. And before I go to the last point, which is just the further readings, I put a number of books. If anyone is interested, maybe you can have a look at these books. It doesn't mean this is the only source that we can look at. There are lots of other books, but I just put 6 kitab names here. But please listen. Hopefully you should listen. You will listen just to a few more points. Number one, when we deal with hadith, we should remember the people who have love for Rasulullah, the people who have love for Islam and Deen, their approach to hadith will be in one approach, and those who have no love, no attachment, and no connection with Rasulullah and his sunnah and stuff, their approach will be completely different. As Muslims, as Sunni Muslims, why and how can we even go and trust those who never have any trust, any love, any attachment with Rasulullah? How can we trust them in their academic approach, in their journals, papers, etc.? How can we trust them over the ulama, those who dedicated their life for hadith and teaching of hadith? That's one point to remember. Second point, as I already indicated earlier, that today in this world, when we read any academic journal paper or anything in English, or we must verify those information, even though that person might be a great speaker, a great scholar, or whatever it is academic, still, because majority I have from my own experience of reading, etc., I found out these people, many of the time, they rely on the secondary sources, latest sources of Islam. They don't go back to the primary sources. And as I said, sadly, none of them even actually care about the main sources. They don't even read Bukhari, and they complain about Bukhari. So yeah, first we need to equip ourselves, we need to make ourselves qualified in Islamic studies, etc. And then maybe we can read their academic journals or books, academic books, etc. Because we'll be able to differentiate between the right and wrong. I would like to say shukran to all of the brothers and sisters who participate today. Jazakumullahu khairan.